Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Kieran and I help people using a spiritual perspective. Today I want to talk about judgment, essentially how we view ourselves. So we live in a world where we pretty much determine our values based on a lot of the things that we have, right? So this could be jobs, money, sex, how many friends you have, your social circle, your recognition, fame, success of those kinds of measures. So we often see our lives in terms of what we have to gain in the future, and not so much about what's going on right now, right? So we're very forward thinking as a species in general, which is probably the reason that we're here and not existing. So we made it this far. We now have TikTok. We're the pinnacle of civilization. But we have lost, I think, sight of something, or maybe we never really had the deepest understanding of it, but there is this lack, this feeling of lack that seems to perpetuate a lot of us. And we're not really sure what to do with it. And we're not really sure that what it's there and what it's trying to say. So an example of this is when we do chase these things, so when we value who we are based on how much money we have, or if we're able to achieve this specific goal in mind, then we are often not going to feel very good about ourselves, because the metric of the metric of what we're measuring our success on is based on something we do not have, or that is in the future. So it becomes very hard to actually feel good about anything. And so the point of this video is to illustrate how much how disastrous it is to our own spiritual sort of psyche, our own spiritual center, to constantly place values of worth about ourselves on things that other people have to say, or something that you could put on a piece of paper. You could think of it as a resume. If you had a resume of your life, or even just a work resume, what do you put on it, right? You put on what you've done, the jobs that you've had, the skills, right? You're putting on things that you have obtained in life, that you've done, that you have something to show for it. But what happens when those things come, or they don't come, and nothing about you changes? Plenty of people have had money, success, women, nice cars, and they don't actually feel any different. And people that don't have those things yet believe that by having them, something will fundamentally change within them, and that they'll suddenly feel good, right? As if life is just one long hand job in which we should constantly just be feeling good all the time, right? Excuse the analogy, ladies, but this is like just a pleasure-seeking thrill ride that apparently we're on. And it's dangerous to who we are, because there is something deeper about us that we should be valuing, that we should be looking at and focusing on. So a small example from my life is I'm trying to get this book published, right? I've sent it out to a lot of publishers, and I believe in the book. And I've actually had an offer that wasn't necessarily what I was looking for, but so I've decided to sort of wait a little bit, right? But I've had some positive feedback on it, but I haven't actually gotten my goal. And I've realized that since I've sent it out, I've become very attached to it coming in, right? Not just for the money that it may or may not make in the future, or what they may offer me as a contract, but because of something that I did, because of what I've worked for. So it's a recognition. It's saying, hey, this is good enough. Somebody is believing in my work as I believe in it, right? But at the same time, there is this insecurity about my own worth that will then come up, because the more focused I am on getting this book published, the more I feel like it needs to happen. Because if it doesn't, then I'm not an author, or I'm not a writer. And if I'm not an author and I'm not a writer, then what I say or what I've written doesn't matter. It's not important, apparently. And if it isn't important, then who am I and what am I worth, right? And you can look at many examples across the board of things of that close, similar nature. If you don't have the money, if you don't have the respect of your elders or your family or other people, or you're not having sex, or you don't have girlfriends or love or boyfriends, or love isn't in your life, right? There's all these things that we need. But with me, just as this example with the book, it's very clear to me that that would not be able to replace the way that I feel about myself now. So you see, I'm looking forward to the future. I'm looking at things in the future that may make me happy now, rather than necessarily focusing on where I'm at, right? Because right now in this moment, my book is not published. It's not picked up, right? And it's just me. I exist with my feelings, with who I am, and what I can be, what I could be. So it's not a healthy or safe metric to start judging ourselves by what we may be able to obtain in the future. Because those things that you could put on a resume, or that you can touch, you can feel, like this glass of water, right? Say if this was a very expensive glass of water, I guess, or maybe just an expensive glass, it could break, right? It could go spilling everywhere, and it would be destroyed. Same thing with your job or your relationships. They can end, things can change, right? So judging ourselves by metrics of the external is not a safe way of making sure that we feel good about ourselves. So what we should be doing is really just focusing on how we feel. That should be the best metric, because even when things are not going to plan, right? When you don't have the job, or you don't have the loving relationship, or you don't have a group of friends that you resonate with at this time, a sort of soul tribe, if you will, you don't have whatever it is you need, a car or some specific manifestation, which is not a bad thing to want. I'm not saying that we should just not want anything. I'm not some monk that lives their whole life in some temple somewhere far away from reality. Those things are fine. But those things at the same time are basically interchangeable. They can change all the time. So if we're going to say to ourselves that that's going to be responsible for how we feel, then it doesn't matter, if we don't have them or if we do have them. So if we don't have these things in the moment, like I mentioned, a car or something that we need, money, whatever goal, that's not an indicator of who we are, of what we are, right? Just because our life may be difficult at a certain time doesn't mean that we have to suffer. Doesn't mean that we have to treat ourselves without compassion, right? That we have to treat ourselves like we're some sort of useless, miserable, redundant sort of creature, right? So, and we only think that way because we're putting our values on what we have, right? And so what happens if those things are taken away? And this is why I feel like a lot of spiritual people who go on a journey, internal journey of some kind, a spiritual awakening, often are left with nothing at some point or other. I really do not think you have ever been through a spiritual awakening if you have not lost everything in your life, or a majority of, if your life hasn't fallen apart, you haven't really lived, okay? I'm going to go ahead and say that. If your life has not fallen apart at some point in your life, you haven't lived a life, all right? That's plain and simple. Whether or not that's part of the awakening, but it usually is a symptom. But people that have lost things in their life will understand what I'm talking about when I say that. And, and it's because that when you take everything away, there's supposed to be something there. What's left, right? It's just you. But what we do is we constantly focus on the future, or we reminisce or ruminate on the past, and it keeps us stuck, right? It keeps us from going forward, because we're not actually focusing on what we're going through now in the time, right? So our emotions are valid, our feelings are valid, but we should show compassion to ourselves. But we don't have to suffer, because a lot of it's not our fault, and things are supposed to change, and we're not very good judges of what we want or need in the future, because we are constantly changing. So it's hard to say if a manifestation that you really, really want, or this specific kind of manifestation, is that right for you at this time? Is there other things that are going to come in, right? We don't really know the future. So we get ourselves all worked up, and we have these values and metrics that are based on these things that we're getting ourselves worked up about, which are essentially things outside of our control, things that we can have, obtain, see, that we can show to others, that we can put on a piece of paper and feel good about ourselves, and others will look at us and go, oh, they're doing something, they're not a loser, things of that nature, right? If we're placing all these values and all this other stuff, then obviously, we're not going to feel very good. So we need to have compassion with ourselves. We need to be able to feel okay about ourselves, right? And you can see this in, introducing maybe a loved one to a family member or your friends, right? You say you're introducing, your boyfriend or something, and your father or your brother says, "Oh, okay, what do they do?" Right? Or they're asking the boyfriend in particular, "What do you do?" It's they're not really interested in what kind of person they are. right? Nobody goes, you got a boyfriend or you got a girlfriend? That's nice. What kind of person are they? Right? It's often what do they do, specifically with men a lot too. But there's a emphasis on what they have to offer in terms of finances or career to the world, and what is it that they're doing. Not what kind of person they are, not what their dreams and hopes are, what they'd like to change. Right? There's never a focus on the emotional, the character, the persona, the spiritual. It's a focus on the 3D, the material, what we have, what we can give. Right? So there's already this sort of imbalance with the way that we perceive things. So it's, of course, hard to remember a lot of the time, but once you can kind of get into that flow of just leaning back into that wisdom of, oh yeah, you know what, I am completely separate of all these things anyway. And I'm separate of a lot of things, even separate from my body, right? From many perspectives. So allowing compassion to wash over you, allowing yourself to take a moment to remember that, you know what, the only way I should be judging myself is by how I feel. Because if I don't have many things that I want at this point in my life, it's not a reflection on who I am. All that's really trying to be taught here is to lean into feeling better about yourself anyway, regardless, right? Because even if you don't have these things, the job, the money, the people, the friends, the women, whatever, the men, the boyfriends, the love, etc., the house, there is still a place you can fall back down to. There's still a level of self-care. There's still a level of responsibility, meaning that, like, if you try your best, then you have nothing to feel bad about. You know, if you know that you could change your diet, or if you know that you could stop engaging in this behavior or pattern, or put these boundaries up here, or do this thing, or give yourself more time to yourself, to meditate a little bit more, to rest. If you know that there are things that you could do better, and you take small but legitimate steps to doing those things through compassion, by treating yourself carefully with love, then it won't ever matter what you don't have, because you've now replaced your metric with who you are now. And ironically, paradoxically, what will always happen is that when you start to feel better about yourself, even when your life is not going the way you want it to, things will move much quicker. Things will happen for you. They'll become into your reality. They'll manifest very quickly, rather than needing them to come in. Because what's happening is you're needing something to fulfill you. And when you have a deeper spiritual perspective, often it doesn't work, because it's a contradiction to your deepest self. And your deepest self knows best. And we're just walking around making noise, to be honest with you.